The forest loomed tall around us as my friends, and I ventured deeper into its heart. We were 4 young adults seeking adventure, yearning for the thrill of the unknown. The lush green canopy above us shielded the sun's rays, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. Birds chirped merrily in the distance, and for a while, it felt like a picturesque escape from the mundanity of our everyday lives. But as we pressed on, an eerie sensation crept over me, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that whispered of something sinister lurking just beyond our vision. It was a feeling I couldn't quite shake, a sense that the ordinary world we knew was but a fragile mirage concealing an unseen terror. Our group consisted of 4 people. There was Alex, the adventurous daredevil always eager for a thrill; Sarah, the introverted artist who sought solace in nature; Mark, the analytical thinker who never left anything to chance; and me, David, the storyteller and aspiring writer, eager to capture the essence of our journey. As we hiked deeper into the woods, we shared our dreams and desires, our innermost motivations laid bare. Alex was chasing the adrenaline rush, Sarah sought inspiration for her art, Mark was determined to conquer his fear of the wilderness, and I longed to craft a tale that would capture the essence of our adventure. Little did we know, our desires would soon intertwine with the looming threat. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to reach out and grab at us as we ventured deeper into the woods. Twisted branches clawed at the path. A heavy silence enveloped the forest, broken only by the rustling of leaves, creating a disquieting symphony of whispers. As we meandered further from the safety of the main trail, we stumbled upon a cabin, its presence an unsettling intrusion upon the serene woodland. The structure loomed ominously, like a forsaken relic from a forgotten nightmare. The cabin's wooden facade was weathered and worn, as if it had borne witness to unspeakable horrors for centuries. Jagged lines marred the walls, forming grotesque patterns that seemed to writhe and shift when viewed from the corner of our eyes. Hesitantly, we approached the cabin's creaking door, which stood ajar, as though beckoning us to enter its nightmarish realm. The hair on the back of our necks stood on end, and a chilling unease gripped us. With trembling hands, we pushed the door open, revealing a scene that would forever haunt our nightmares. Inside, the cabin was a grotesque gallery of horrors. The walls were adorned with sinister artwork, each painting depicting mutilated bodies, contorted faces twisted in agony, and demonic entities that seemed to leer at us with malevolent intent. The floors were stained with unspeakable filth, and a sickly crimson hue clung to everything, as if the very essence of suffering had seeped into the very fabric of the cabin itself. Tables cluttered with an array of menacing instruments caught our attention next. Bloodied knives and saws glistened malevolently under the dim light, their edges seemingly honed to perfection for a sinister purpose. A heavy sense of dread pressed upon us, and the once inviting forest beyond the cabin now felt like an impenetrable maze of malevolence. We had unwittingly stepped into a waking nightmare, a realm where the boundaries of terror had blurred beyond recognition. And little did we know, as we stared into the abyss of that cabin, that the true horrors had only just begun to unfold. As we stood frozen in horror within the wretched cabin, an eerie, suffocating stillness enveloped us. The unsettling paintings seemed to leer at us, and the evil of the place clung to our very souls. It was then that a shadowy movement beyond the cabin's cracked window pane caught my eye. I peered outside, squinting into the dim forest beyond. Through the gnarled trees at the edge of the clearing, I saw a figure emerging from the shadows, a sinister silhouette cast against the line of trees. My heart hammered in my chest as I realized this was the owner of the cabin, his blood-soaked apron billowing behind him like a macabre flag of dread. His face, obscured in the fading twilight, seemed contorted in a grotesque grin of malice. He had seen us, and with malevolent intent, he started to run towards us from the tree line, his heavy boots thudding ominously on the forest floor. Fear clutched our hearts, and we knew that our encounter with this butcher was not confined to the horrors within the cabin. We were thrust into a nightmarish reality where the relentless pursuit of a madman would become our inescapable fate. As we fled the cabin, the guttural laughter of the approaching butcher echoed through the woods, sealing our doom in the encroaching darkness. Our frantic flight through the forest continued, hearts pounding, and breathless gasps for air filling the tense silence between us. The relentless pursuit of the butcher drove us deeper into the thicket, where tangled underbrush clawed at our clothes and twigs snapped beneath our frantic footsteps. During our frenzied escape, a cruel twist of fate intervened. Mark, our analytical thinker, stumbled over an exposed root, his body crashing to the forest floor with a gut-wrenching thud. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Mark, sprawled amidst the gnarled roots, struggled to regain his footing. Fear gnawed at our hearts, and an agonizing choice loomed before us. No words were spoken. In our desperate flight, we left Mark behind, his terrified cries echoing through the trees as we pressed on. As the distance between us and Mark grew, we couldn't ignore the growing realization that the butcher had claimed him. Mark's harrowing screams filled the air, a haunting symphony of agony that sent shivers down our spines. The relentless malevolence of the forest itself seemed to conspire with the butcher, amplifying the sound of Mark's torment. Each step forward was a cruel reminder of the choice we made, the weight of our desperation bearing down on us. The woods, once a place of refuge, had become a labyrinth of dread and despair, and the horrific fate that had befallen Mark was a harrowing testament to the relentless pursuit that now haunted us all. The forest, now shrouded in the ominous cloak of night, became a twisted labyrinth of despair as we continued our frantic escape from the evil butcher. Our breaths came in ragged gasps, our hearts pounding in rhythm with our echoing footsteps. The crazy maniac that pursued us seemed to thrive in the darkness, his presence ever more palpable. We felt like branches reached out like skeletal fingers, clawing at us as we tore through the underbrush, and unseen eyes glimmered with malignant intent from the shadows. As we ran, our internal conflicts and fears became more pronounced. Alex, who had once reveled in adventure, now second-guessed every reckless choice he had ever made. Sarah, the artist, felt her inspiration curdle into a grotesque mockery of creativity. The butcher was an ever-present threat, lurking just beyond the edge of our vision. The malevolent laughter that emanated from him seemed to mock our feeble attempts at escape, a reminder that we were not in control of our destinies. The pursuit wore on, and with each passing moment, the threat grew stronger, its power becoming more pronounced. Fear clung to us like a suffocating shroud, and the isolation we felt was inescapable. We knew that the forest held us captive, and the darkness conspired to drive a wedge between us, breaking the bonds that had once united us. As we ran, the forest seemed to close in around us, and the air grew heavy with dread. It was then, in the heart of the woods, that we heard it, the bone-chilling sound of footsteps closing in from behind, accompanied by the chilling echo of the butcher's laughter. The face-to-face confrontation with the mad butcher seemed imminent. As we stumbled through the tangled underbrush, a clearing suddenly materialized before us, bathed in the silvery glow of the moon. There, beneath the eerie light, stood the butcher, an embodiment of terror that defied all reason. His grotesque visage was illuminated in sinister detail for the first time. The butcher's eyes gleamed with a hellish fervor, twin orbs of evil that seemed to penetrate our very souls. His skin was pallid and stretched taut over a big muscular frame, his face twisted into a malefic grin. In his blood-soaked hands, he clutched a wickedly serrated knife, its blade glinting malevolently in the moonlight. He wore a tattered apron stained with the crimson evidence of his gruesome work, the fabric clinging to his emaciated form like a shroud of damnation. We were frozen in terror, our collective willpower shattered by the horrific vision before us. It was then that Alex, driven by a surge of courage born of desperation, snatched up a jagged rock from the forest floor. With a guttural cry, he lunged at the butcher, his face contorted in a rictus of defiance. But the butcher was faster, his movements a grotesque ballet of malevolence. In a horrifying blur, he dodged Alex's desperate attack, his vice-like grip closing around Alex's wrist. A savage twist of the butcher's knife was all it took, and the night air was rent with Alex's agonized screams. The gruesome scene played out before our eyes, etching itself into our nightmares. In that moment, we realized the futility of our fight, the sheer brutality of the butcher's power. He had claimed another one of us. With terror coursing through our veins, we turned and fled, our hearts pounding. With each passing moment, we wandered further into the unknown, our footsteps heavy and faltering. Hunger gnawed at our empty stomachs, and exhaustion clung to our weary bodies like a heavy weight. The forest was a cruel mistress, its shadows concealing unseen terrors that seemed to lurk around every corner. Fear had become our constant companion. The oppressive silence was broken only by the mournful whispers of the wind, as if the very trees themselves lamented our plight. We had lost track of time, and with it, all sense of hope. Our injuries throbbed in tandem with our racing hearts, and the chill of the forest night seeped through our clothes, sapping our remaining strength. The moon, a pale sliver in the ink-black sky, offered no solace, its feeble light revealing nothing but the desolation that surrounded us. The forest seemed infinite, an endless expanse of darkness and dread, and we were but lost souls, at the mercy of the merciless night. As the cold, unfeeling forest sapped the last remnants of our strength, despair settled over us like a suffocating shroud. We were alone, lost, and utterly vulnerable. The pursuit of the butcher had left us broken and depleted, our once unbreakable spirits reduced to mere whispers in the void. In the heart of the forest, we clung to one another, our breaths coming in shallow gasps, our hearts heavy with the weight of our desperate flight. With our strength waning and hope all but lost, we trudged through the unforgiving forest, every step a struggle against the relentless night. It was then, as despair threatened to consume us entirely, that we stumbled upon a dimly lit cabin nestled amidst the trees. We approached the cabin slowly. With trembling hands, we slowly opened the door, revealing the dim interior. A sense of cautious relief washed over us as we realized that we had found shelter at last. Inside, the cabin was a sanctuary from the maniac. The warm glow of the lanterns cast gentle shadows, and the air was filled with the comforting scent of aged wood. At this moment our eyes stopped on a radio, a lifeline to the outside world, and our trembling fingers scrambled to bring it to life. We couldn't believe we heard a voice from the other side. It was a park ranger. He assured us that they were on their way to rescue us, that we should stay inside and await their arrival. We felt a sense of relief, and smiles were appearing on our faces. But as the words of reassurance flowed through the radio's crackling speaker, the door of the cabin suddenly shuddered, and with an explosive crash, it burst open. There, framed in the doorway, stood the butcher, his eyes aflame with rage and malevolence. Time seemed to stand still as the butcher entered the cabin, his very presence a harbinger of doom. With terrifying efficiency, he pushed me to the ground, and within less than a second he seized Sarah, his bloody knife gleaming ominously in the cabin's feeble light. The screams that followed were a haunting chorus of agony and terror, and in an instant, her life was extinguished. As the brutal scene unfolded before me, I seized the only chance at survival that remained. With a heart pounding with sheer terror, I slipped out of the cabin and into the merciless night once more. The forest, shrouded in darkness, seemed to conspire with the malevolent butcher, as if the very shadows themselves were his accomplices. I fled, leaving behind the cabin and the lifeless body of my friend. The chilling laughter of the butcher echoed in the distance, a reminder that the malevolence that had pursued us still lurked in the depths of the unforgiving forest. In the inky darkness of the forest, I sprinted through the tangled underbrush. The pursuit of the butcher had left me a lone survivor, and my only instinct was to flee, to escape the malevolent force that had tormented us. My senses were overwhelmed by the suffocating night. With each desperate stride, I ventured further into the labyrinthine woods, my terror and exhaustion gnawing at my resolve. As I ran, the forest seemed to conspire against me, and I didn't see the treacherous ledge that loomed in the obsidian night. With a heart-stopping jolt, I plummeted over the edge, tumbling headlong down a steep slope, my body careening uncontrollably. I landed with a bone-jarring thud at the bottom, my limbs aching, and my breath stolen by the impact. My leg bore the brunt of the fall, and a searing pain shot through it as I struggled to sit up. It was injured, perhaps broken, and I was left with a painful limp that rendered escape even more difficult. As I gathered my wits, I realized that I had landed on a dirt road, a serendipitous twist of fate that had delivered me from the unforgiving forest. With a mixture of relief and desperation, I began to hobble along the road, my progress slow and painful. The night remained cold, its darkness unforgiving as I limped forward, haunted by the chilling laughter that echoed in the distance. I felt that the butcher was very close, and my injured leg served as a constant reminder of my vulnerability. As I limped along the desolate dirt road, my injured leg throbbing with each painful step, the first faint hints of dawn began to break on the horizon. The night had been an unrelenting ordeal, and the crazy butcher's relentless pursuit had left me with a sinking sense of inevitability. The first rays of the morning sun cast long shadows along the road, and as I glanced over my shoulder, I saw the trees at the edge of the forest parting. Emerging from the shadows was the butcher's massive silhouette cast starkly against the emerging light. For a fleeting moment, we locked eyes, and in that instant, I knew that this final confrontation was at hand. The butcher's malevolent gaze bore into me a promise of the horrors to come. With resignation, I made peace with my fate, knowing that my injured leg left me with no chance of escape or resistance. The butcher's expression contorted into a grotesque grin as he began to charge, his menacing form closing the distance between us with terrifying speed. I could feel the evil that emanated from him, the palpable aura of death. Just as despair threatened to claim me entirely, a deafening shot echoed through the air, shattering the oppressive silence of the morning. The butcher, now only a few paces away, faltered in his charge, his malevolent intent momentarily derailed. Before my disbelieving eyes, a park ranger emerged from the trees, his pickup truck parked beside the dirt road. In his hands, he held a rifle. A second shot followed, and the butcher's grotesque form was torn asunder by the impact. He fell to the ground, his once menacing presence reduced to a lifeless heap. The forest itself seemed to heave a sigh of relief as the maniac was vanquished. As the park ranger approached, his expression a mixture of concern and relief, I realized that I was the sole survivor of the horrors that had unfolded in the unforgiving woods. The relentless pursuit, the nights of terror, and the sacrifice of my friends had brought me to this moment of surreal victory. Soon enough, I was back in the familiar confines of my home. I found solace in the comforting embrace of four walls and a roof, safe from the horrors that had haunted me in the unforgiving forest. My injured leg was slowly healing, a physical reminder of the ordeal that had tested the limits of my endurance. Yet, despite the safety of my surroundings, I was far from at ease. Night after night, as I lay in my bed, the horrors of the past continued to torment my dreams. The butcher's malevolent gaze, the haunting echoes of his evil pursuit, and the agonized cries of my friends played out in chilling detail, a reel of terror that refused to release its grip on my subconscious. Guilt weighed heavy on my soul, a burden that I could never fully shake. I couldn't escape the nagging thought that my actions, my decisions, had led to the fates of my friends. Their sacrifices haunted me, their faces a constant presence in my waking hours as well as my nightmares. The world had moved on, oblivious to the horrors I had faced, but I couldn't forget. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, my senses heightened to the slightest hint of danger. The ordinary world had lost its comforting veneer, replaced by a relentless paranoia that refused to release its grip. I was forever changed by the horrors I had witnessed, and the scars, both physical and emotional, would be a haunting reminder of the evil that had forever altered the course of my life.